Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining another Lead Squared webinar. I am Shivani Roy, and you may have received an email or two from me. So thanks so much again for joining us. This session is specifically for those in the higher education space, but as always, anyone else willing to learn and listen to our experts is always welcome. So what we're discussing today is a breakthrough in post-secondary Indian education. So this is for digital universities, a breakthrough in post-secondary education. We have two great speakers up on the panel today. And before I get to that, I will introduce our moderator, who is Jagrati, who is the head of education initiatives at Lead Square. Hey, Jagrati, thanks so much for moderating the session. Uh,
Hi, Shivani. Thank you.
Hi. So, with that, let me just get to the speakers. First, I'd like to request Gaurav to say a few words. So, Gaurav is the CEO at Rise, and here's more from him about his at work and outside of work activities.
Lovely. Uh, Hi, I'm Gaurav Bhatia. I CEO at Rise. And prior to working at Rise, I've probably worked in the education sector for more than a decade now, across the globe, largely. Prior to that, I'm an engineer, other techie who went to business school and then eventually decided to, first work here in the higher ed sector. So that's been my career by and large. Started off in the Middle East first, then in Singapore, then moved on to Europe, West Europe, then moved down to India. Mostly in the corporate space till about 2017 with large organizations, but then moved on to in the startup world in India, doing very well. I had that itch of not being in corporate for too long, so moved on to this, and don't regret it one bit. So this is my third start, one after the other, and it's always been education. So I think that's been the commonality for the last decade. So, outside of work, I have a child, my son, who's turning 12 in next week. So I play chess with him. I've lost my last 14 games with him consecutive. So that's some shame on my face, but that's okay. But he's really picked up the game very well. So I think I'm not able to find time to compete with him at this moment, or rather, he doesn't want to play with me. So that's essentially it. I have a family, small family. It's my wife, my mother, and my son. We stay together in Pune. Bangalore is also home to us. We've recently adopted Pune as home because of that. And both cities are very similar in some ways. The traffic is bad in both places. So,
Yeah.
so, so I think with that being said, I think that's a quick introduction. I'll give it on to Rajiv. Shivan.
So Rajiv is the deputy director of marketing at Edulogy. More from you, Rajiv. What do you like to do outside of work and at work?
Thank you so much, Shivani. Thanks, Gaurav. Thanks, Jagriti. Hello, everyone. My name is Rajiv. I look into marketing here at Ideology. It's a global, professional learning platform, and I look into the global marketing of it. Uh, Purely from the work side, it's been almost 12 and a half years. I've been contributing myself into online marketing and marketing as a whole, looking at how behavior of the people have changed over a period of time, how people have started adopting largely a tech product, because it's been 7-8 years I've been in a tech only. uh, and it has been an interesting journey seeing how India and across the globe, the learning behavior has changed, how people have started, how so many players started coming in the space, how people have started finding the right product, how learning started getting democratized over a period of time, and what it really means for a content to go out and for people to consume and learn. Right now, I'm associated with one of the universities also, and have a, I can call it, have a fair degree of understanding out how people are behaving. It's good 20-25,000 students who are learning at a campus, and how they choose a program, how they buy it. So yeah, I want to remain in education space. It has been, and it's so fulfilling to contribute to the society in a larger way, and give so much meaning to life. Before that, I was running my own company, and again, it was a marketing agency. It has been a fantabulous journey for me. So I'm an engineer by education. Went to a business school, and then that's how life, took me here, and no regrets. I'm based out of Gurgaon, and Gurgaon, in terms of traffic, is fairly catching up with Bangalore and Pune, ensuring that it's the competence is matched. And every evening you leave the office, you see and you miss one of the cities. So yeah, that has been my introduction. Apart from work, I play squash, I play cricket. So that has been my love, and workout, etc. It's been interesting. I love to largely read about what is going on as an industry trend and what people do. Some of the people I look up to, follow, and try to learn. So yeah, it has been a fairly interesting journey for me so far. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before I disappear, I'd like to just tell the audience, we want to keep this a very engaging, free flowing session. If you have questions, please put them on the right side on the chat panel. Questions, comments. We just want to say hi, introduce yourself. We'd love to know. So please keep that going. Would love to hear from you. With that, I hand it over to our moderator for the day, Jagruti. Please take it up.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for giving 1 hour of your time this evening. So, as Shivani mentioned, today we'll be discussing about digital universities and how they are a breakthrough in post-secondary education in India. Some of the key points that we'll be discussing are some of the gaps that these universities are filling in the traditional education system in India, as well as the role of technology in enhancing student experience and identifying the right partnerships with universities, with corporates, with instructors to sort of grow this industry and this space in the future. So I think it'll be a really conversational session, and any one of the panelists can jump in and share their thoughts. I'm sure both of you will have a lot to say. So one of my first questions is that there are a lot of employers that we hear say that the gap in the traditional education comes from the context or the skills that are being amiss when it comes to traditional education. So, what are some of these alternative courses, alternative methods of education that have been cropping up in India? What do they have to offer?
Gaurav, can you start with this?
Oh, sure. So I think the question that you asked, are there gaps in the traditional education system? I think I'd like to first thank the traditional education system. I think all of us are an outcome of the traditional education system. The challenge with the traditional education system is it's overburdened. If you look at the number of students we have in the class, the amount of time the teacher has to give in the classroom and work outside the classroom, you'll realize that there is often very little scope.
Hi, sorry, Gaurav. I think there is a slight crack in your voice. Maybe you want to rejoin the session as you had suggested. I think that would be best.
I'll do that. Rajiv, you can address the question. I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So coming back to the question, Javeri, thanks for asking. And as Gaurav was saying, I'm just taking that forward in a way. Is we are largely the outcome of traditional learning that has been there, and we have learned that way. But my behavior is that the alternate learning that started because of the availability out there, and because of the penetration of internet, and another level of content started. I mean, people have started generating humongous amount of content, and that gave a variety of quality and learning medium for people to choose and learn from. Right? So what earlier available in terms of the very access of knowledge was scalability issue and issue of the options. But I think with digital, we have started getting so many options and so much of availability that sometimes I feel that for a person to learn these days something and go out and associate, unless there's a certification needed, everything else can be learned online, right? And people can learn, practice, and so much of quality content which was not available earlier there. So I think this largely played a role with the access of internet. Right now, we are in India, we are around 53% of internet penetration, which is likely to grow in coming few years post 5G intervention, and the way some of the classical development, if you've seen, it is not just about learning as an alternate medium, it is about learning as a whole. The very behavior has changed. The way India has picked up UPI and how to use UPI and how to do internet banking. so overall digital literacy has gone off the roof, and that kind of enabled a lot of uh, people to find out what kind of information they want to consume, how they want to consume, and when they want to consume. And since these three things are available for people to choose for free, it became far more easier for people to have an alternate form of learning. While while one of the key thing that is important here is that information is out there for people to learn, but how to structure that in a form and shape and make sure that people learn in a way that is going to give them dividends in the longer run.
Yeah.
If we see this very space, most of the learning are happening where people can make use of that information in some or the other form, right? So most of the skills started emerging, and people started learning those skills. They started making use of that skill in their day-to-day job, and this has been a phenomenal uh, career opportunity for a lot of people. This opened the floodgate of career for a lot of people, where it is I mean, if you trace back 15 years back, 10 years back, it was really difficult for someone to say that they have decided to change the entire career trajectory. If you're an accountant, if you learn accountancy, you have to remain an accountant for next 30-40 years of your life. But now I think things have changed. I mean, people can just learn any skill within 6 months, and they can reshape their resume in many ways and then start taking a different path altogether. I think this has happened largely because of the accessibility and the digital literacy that largely started happening. So yeah, over to you, Gaurav.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think I agree with. Firstly, can everybody hear me well? Am I audible this time around?
You're absolutely, yeah, loud and
Lovely.
clear.
Okay. So I think to what Rajiv mentioned, agree with each and every point. I think that the last 10 years have been instrumental, monumental in the way education's changed. But one of the key things when it comes to traditional education and the gap that we're filling in is I was talking before I left about the burden on the education system, right? We have a lot of students, the number of the faculty student ratios are, not in order when you compare it to countries that have a smaller population size. And so there's only so much that a teacher, for example, or lecturer can do to essentially ensure that he's taking care of each individual's needs, right? It's not possible. But with technology, that's possible, right? I know, for example, what my students' learning needs are. I know, for example, where they were before they started the course. I know, for example, that my remedial measures for each student can also be different, right? I can do that analysis very easily. So I think from that perspective, students are also able to get better outcomes today with, if you look at technology, the enabler, right? You've got to look at it how it's currently complementing the system also, both in the classroom as well as for aspects where, like Raji, you mentioned, you have somebody who might have started off. I give a real example. I have people working for me who decided to pursue a career in fashion, right? Complete the degree. They got into it thinking that's what they want to do. And eventually they realize that's not a career choice that they want to make for themselves. And then are now working for a net firm. Now, this is not, uh, and they're doing something that's very, very different. The industry is very different. But they're in here today because they believe that they have an opportunity to find a job. Maybe a decade ago, they didn't have this opportunity to even find a job in the sector. They reskilled themselves in other areas. They took up programs in marketing. And today, for example, some of them work in my graphics team, for example. I have people who graduate in engineering but are writing content because that's what gives them happiness. They realize that that's their area of strength and they want to further in it, right? And I think a lot of that change is also coming in because there is access to information, access to opportunities. And the biggest change that has come up today, and that was not available maybe a decade or two ago, is the ability to connect with uh, with mentors, right? So, for example, mentorship earlier was limited to your friends and family. Today, that mentorship could come to you, from mentors that are working within a tech platform, from people that you may have connected on social media who are helping each other, for example, through LinkedIn and so on and so forth. So there are platforms for it as well. But I think collectively, that's really reshaping education, because your access to information is becoming easier. Your access to people who are willing to help you is becoming easier, and companies today are also very, very open in accepting people who are coming in from the programs that are not coming in from the traditional education system. So I think that's also changing.
I just want to add 2 points to what Gaurav mentioned. I think with alternate form of learning, which is digital learning, a lot of change happened towards how to leverage data and really shape the way the entire learning is happening. So in a way, we can personalize the learning for n number of students at scale, and that has been a phenomenal help in this. At the same time, uh, as you rightly again mentioned, Gaurav, that companies have started accepting people from diverse backgrounds. It has been contributing and helpful for companies also to find out people who are coming from diverse mindset. They've learned something and now they are able to blend it in a super creative way and contribute. In my team, I've seen a lot of engineers, and there is a guy in my previous company. He actually prepared for NEET exams and he wanted to become a doctor, but he ended up choosing product marketing, and now in the form of marketing, and is doing pretty well because I think the traditional education that people have got and done somewhere has kind of strengthened the foundation of it, and that is also with in the availability of information. This is kind of enabling them to shape, because the foundation is strong. They're able to shape their career in many ways, and this is being an universally acceptable fact now. uh, those days are really fading when companies were strict that you have to have this particular degree to be able to qualify to come to join us, right? And I think with more experiments going on, this trend and openness is also kind of coming into light. Also, one word, Gaurav, that you mentioned is about happiness and fulfillment. I think that is a very, very, very powerful thing that is really changing. And if you observe keenly, I see that people have started looking up to the things that are giving them happiness and fulfillment at work, at life. And there's somewhere start. I think COVID also played a major role in this, when people have really started realizing that how fragile life is, and do what is needed, and making us feel fulfilled and happy at work and at life at scale. And if a particular work is giving, and if there is an opportunity for me to relearn something, unlearn something, and reinvent myself in some ways, let's give it a chance. I've seen people taking the path of spirituality or sports, and they've started doing it. I've never thought of there'll be a sports scientist as a career, and people have started learning these things and how these new career options are actually emerging. So yeah, thank you so much, Gaurav, for bringing those points. Were really helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you.
there's one. Just wanted to add on one point to what you mentioned, just carrying it forward. I think a lot of students, when they graduate, and many of us, for example, may have found our first opportunities at the university, right? There was, and back in the day, I'm talking in my case, more than 2 decades back, uh, when we were taking our first opportunity, it was also like a mass effect, right? Our friends are joining a certain company, there is mass hiring happening, we end up going there, or so on and so forth. That also happens today, right? So students often take up the first opportunity. uh, I wouldn't call it herd mentality, but they sometimes take it up because that's the best thing that they believe will be the right thing for them. And when they get into that job and they actually work there, they realize, okay, there's not a career option I want for myself. Now you're also stuck because you don't know what to do next. I think that's essentially where a lot of students shouldn't feel stuck, right? Because there's always an option. They can always go out and reskill themselves if they identify that the the workplace, for example, or the role that they are doing at this given moment is not something that they feel fulfilled with. They have an opportunity to kind of go back, reskill themselves, and find employability again. So I think that's critical, and that's happening. That's happening. A lot of people taking up some of these programs are people who want to have a different career, and better is relative, but a different career is actually something that a lot of students want to do, and that's essentially where a lot of these online programs come into play. Jagriti, over to you.
True, very true. I think, yeah, one of the some of the points that you all mentioned when it comes to employability, or when it comes to lifelong learning, or when it even comes to changing the trajectory of your career. In fact, all of these have been possible because of accessibility, because of internet, because of the kind of information and content we have available tonight. So, my next question would be: do you also think that these forms of alternative education is sort of what to say? They are harping on the fact that we should be lifelong learners, and they're actually nurturing that quality that each and everybody who has access to this information should be lifelong learners.
Can I start?
Rajiv, please.
Yeah, I think Rajiv can start this time.
So, so I think whenever an event happens, it changes the behavior of people in many ways. So, for example, so demonetization was the event, right? And when that event happened, it changed the behavior of people for forever. So, for example, people were forced to accept the fact that this can change, and if there is an opportunity to learn a different way to do transaction, people have learned it, and therefore I think a lot of success of UPI goes to demonetization also, where people were able to change the very mindset of how money works, right? And how it can be work, and how different kind of money can be trusted. Because initially a lot of apprehension about it, right? That can you really trust a digital money? But then people have started trusting it, and see where UPI has taken us. Similarly, I think when COVID happened and this traditional education and learning systems were at dark for a period of time, people were forced to consume content, and there's so much data around, right? How content consumption just started happening from tier 3 cities, right? And people were learning, and in our personal connect also, we know a lot of people, when schools were shut, parents were trying to figure out a way to ensure that their kids are engaged, and in that duration a lot of startups emerged, right? And people accepted them as an alternate form of learning, and this became a norm, and this became normal over a period of time. So when you say lifelong learning, I believe now this is fixed, and this is there as a theorem. People have accepted it, that there is another way of learning out there, and if there is an opportunity out there, why should we miss it? So uh, so so for example, if you see, just look at the OTTs also, they've started coming up with a lot of educational content as well, right? So and they're getting massive views, right? People these days are talking about, so much of knowledge started emerging suddenly. I know some of my friends who I never thought will be active on Twitter as a channel, because there was so much of Instagram kind of people started adapting on their habits on Twitter, and they started learning more from me. So how different kind of digital universities started coming up. So I think this very fact of, can we be a lifelong learner, or is it a choice? I think this is no more a choice. This is more of a aspiration for people, and this has started giving them fulfillment. So gone are the days when people used to say ki, my learning has happened, now I'm going to do a job, okay, and that is going to be my life for next few years. In job, people are ready to learn in many ways, and people are seeking opportunities to learn. For example, an engineer is sitting with a marketing guy. A marketing guy is sitting with a student experience guy, for example, and trying to understand how people are actually behaving. uh, I have an example to quote here, that in my team, there was a time when student experience team, product team, marketing team, they all sat together to design what kind of technology we should adopt for the business, because that is how you are able to really orchestrate the entire student experience and find out what is really needed and be empathetic to this. But and this worked well for us in many ways. And they were quite open to learn what is needed for them to learn to take the better decision for a person who's ready to join them as a student. So I think, yes, I believe this has been a universally acceptable fact, that if there is something out there to learn for your growth, betterment, fulfillment, let's not leave a chance to avoid it. And if it is on Instagram, social media, wherever, I think learning has been a form of very behavior, or part of behavior after this. The way podcasts has started growing up in India, people started watching, and there is a data around it that people have started watching more of an 15-20 minute podcast, because they believe that if I'm having lunch, or if I'm having a typical sutta chai break, I can utilize the 15-minute learning something. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
over to you, Gaurav.
Right. So I think let's go back to the traditional classroom, right? So we go back to the traditional classroom, we graduate, right? And we believe that our employer will take care of our learning needs, right? And specifically, if you're a techie or working in tech, you realize the platforms that you are using, your employer trains you on certain platforms, and 2 to 3 years later, those platforms are not being used anymore. You got to learn a new platform, right? You got to kind of move on. How technology is evolved. So your learning needs typically, if you're in the tech role or in medicine, for example, in medicine, it was a known fact even for many years that every 5 years, for example, the medicines that you take, you got to kind of relook at it by 20%. And which is why, if you look at even the country, there's a requirement for continuous medical education, right? Each doctor has to have about 25 hours or of 25 hours of learning every year, or so on and so forth. This is the norm, if I'm not wrong, or every 3 years. So the point I'm trying to draw attention to is that continuous learning has been there. It's been there for ages. But in the past, the expectation was, even for employers, right? They would work with, in corporates, they would take people to, they would arrange these programs, people or teams or senior management would probably have access to going out to hotels where trainers would come in and train people, or in some cases they would send you to universities, and the exec education department of universities would train you. So that traditional method continues to exist. The challenge with, and I think what Raji mentioned, with COVID, a lot of that changed, right? Because I couldn't travel. Now I can't travel, so it's not that my learning is going to stop. So what are my other options? And I have no choice but to adopt digital education. Now digital education also been there for a while, but the adoption increased manifold in this time frame. And I think now people realize that you can get the same outcomes because you have access to the same trainers. And the most beautiful part of this is equitable, right? I can reach out to people at a time, they can study at a time when they are comfortable. And if I am at work, for example, and I want to learn a new concept, right, and it's important for me to do something, then I can probably go down to YouTube as well. I don't have to even look at paid content, for example. But even YouTube has a lot of free content. As long as I'm willing to learn, right, I have access to information and content. And if I'm looking at specific people to train me, or specific individuals to train me, or specific organizations to train me, I also have that as a possibility without having to burn a hole in my pocket, right? Because when I do, I'm in a physical classroom, or I have to kind of use a larger facility to kind of run a program, there are associated costs with it, right? With the advent, the increase of online adoption, your costs of providing high quality education actually come down. And I think that improves access. It improves, it's quite advantageous because people can learn at all points in time. People can learn quickly, which is why you will also realize that people today are moving up the ladder very quickly, right? For example, when my father, for example, was working, he's no more, but when he was working, to be a manager was where people would often retire. They would retire at the position of manager or senior manager, right? It was very difficult to be a director because people's career hierarchies and the time frame to move up the hierarchy was very, very long, right? Today, for example, people are moving up the ladder every couple of years. Now it's not like things have become easier or things are more rosy. It's also because people are upskilling themselves more quickly. People are realizing the value that if they have to move up the ladder, if their organization isn't doing it for them, they have to take the onus on it themselves. They're not leaving the onus on somebody else, that my future is going to decide by somebody else. I've taken up a job, now my future is on my employer. Everyone's taking accountability for their future, and they are also spending that time and effort on upskilling and reskilling themselves. And I think that's the biggest change that I've seen over the last decade.
Very true, Gaurav. I mean, like, yeah, even today I've observed, even as an employee today, I also want to constantly keep learning so that I can also grow in my career. And because things are available and accessible to me, it's always been one click away where I have access to all the information that I want to upskill myself. And that is where another point, a very valid point that you made, Gaurav, was about the adoption of technology with the pandemic and whatever happened in the past 2 years. Yes, it was really unfortunate. We had slowed down quite a bit. There were businesses that could not, in fact, run online and had to sort of battle their way through to normalcy, as we may say. But the education sector especially thrived, if not grew to whatever level it has today, but it really thrived. And we could see that not only the students, but even the teachers and the universities and schools were ready to adopt technology in a much faster way. So that points to my next question: that what do you think? How can digital universities or edtechs that are already that started their path with technology and with technology aiding their onboarding processes or teaching students and engaging with students, what can universities, traditional universities or physical universities can learn from them through your processes? I
So
think
I'll
Gaurav,
take
yeah,
this one.
sure.
I'll take this one because I'm working on this at this moment with traditional universities. We work with a lot of traditional universities and colleges in the country. And what we've also realized, so I'll tell you, the last 2 years, because there was no option and students couldn't come on campus, everybody was using digital, right? And now with the students coming back on campus, even universities want the students to come into the classroom. Even the students want to go back to the classroom because they want to socialize. They want to meet their friends. They want to, make new acquaintances, build new relationships. I think it's extremely important. As human beings, we are social animals. So it's extremely important that we find a way to socialize and learn from each other. I think that's not going anywhere. So if I look at how, rather than looking at what the universities can learn from us, I think it's about how we can complement each other. So let's look at a traditional university system. For example, if I have to do an orientation, right, I would do it batch wise, or I would do it classroom wise, which means the same information is actually being relayed multiple times. If you adopt digital means, that means that you can actually have multiple people getting access to the same information at one go, right? So that saves you time, it saves you effort. If I have to kind of run a test, or for example an examination, back in the day, for example, examinations are used to take examinations on a certain date, our results would come out a few months later. It still happens, right? With school examinations, for example, you don't get instant results. But if your examinations have gone online, there's nothing stopping you, for example, to give your results out the very next day, or maybe a few days later if you want to kind of keep some room to review and ensure things are closed. So efficiency comes in because you adopted and are using technology for the good, for the right reasons. So I think that's already happening. I know a lot of universities are already doing that, right? You're measuring your classroom interaction, you're measuring where your students are, have regular learning requirements, you're measuring whether your students are accessing information, right, while having a physical classroom and lessons also, right? Your digital content also complements the classroom content in some cases. Let me tell you, was I think most private universities in the country are struggling with having enough faculty, right? Most universities are struggling with 20, at least having less than 20%. I mean, at an average, they have about 20% vacancy across most tier 2, tier 3 universities. Even the numbers of people that they want to employ can even be higher, right? I'm just giving you average numbers based on the discussions I've had so far. I've heard the numbers even go up to 40% in some cases, but 20%, let's assume it's even 20%, it's still a very, very large number, right? Because that puts in a lot of pressure on the current faculty to kind of ensure that they are able to make up or meet up for that gap. That doesn't necessarily happen. So there's a breakdown. Now, when you have you have content, or for example, you have platforms that can help take up certain elements, like industry, for example. If they come up, and now that's the reason also the UGC came up with this norm that you are professors of practice. That if you're a professor of practice, you can come in and teach. You don't have to do a PhD necessarily to come and teach in the classroom. You may have a lot of relevant experience in that domain. Maybe you can come up and teach that, right? And faculties also from the universities are actually going into industry to learn and see what is happening. So it's a two-way street, right? They can learning can happen on both sides, at the industry side as well, and on the academia side as well. So I think that's already happening. And because of that, right, because of all of these things taking place, from the digital standpoint, we are seeing the best of both worlds to the current students, right? We are seeing that the universities are also picking up content platforms, using technology to improve and bring in more efficiency, because they want to get a lot done with what they have and in the current infrastructure, because that's one aspect. And I think that's going to be the clear differentiator between India 10 or 15 years back versus India today. Digital is going nowhere. Classrooms are back. Digital education and infrastructure is going to complement and supplement the classroom education both ways. So I think that's my input here. Rajiv, on your side.
Well, I think I'll just second to what you mentioned. I think we are at the perfect blend right now, and we see students making the best use of both also. So they are. So one of the things that started happening is that even if people are sitting in the classroom, they are able to bridge the gap by taking information from digital world and having that discussed in the classroom, and that is kind of taking the entire vibe and learning level of the classroom to the next level, where people have started building synchronicity between offline and online world. And I think that is the way to go forward. We cannot choose one, because then there is trade-off. Digital gives you accessibility at scale, but it doesn't solve the personalized learning problem and then the one-on-one interaction. So that is also needed. And uh, there is a saying that people learn more in the with the group in the campus than they learn in the classroom. And I think that is true. That happened to me. I have learned more with my group in the class, in the batch, when I was doing my engineering, versus when I was sitting in the classroom. Because most of the time before the classroom, either I would have revisited those things, or learned those things, or after the classroom I had to revisit, right? But in the class, I think this is more of the group and the bonding, and the kind of connect and the learning that emerges out of that is become a lifelong learning for people. And now, since digital is there and accessibility of information is there, it is working as a catalyst for people to have different things to talk about. Now there is not a good 3 hour break for people to decide what kind of assignment they are going to do over the weekend. It can be done within 5 minutes, right? And so it is really addressing problem at both end. And I sometimes envy the people who are in the campus and learning, because they are able to leverage both the things. I'm from 90s, so probably I miss those things. I am from Yahoo generation, but I
Yeah.
think kids today, they are able to really learn things fast. They are able to clear their doubts. So there is something they've learned in the class, and as we all believe that not all 40-50 students get equal amount of learning in the class, but what they can do, they can go back and ensure that they are on the same page. They can, as Gaurav rightly mentioned, that there is humongous amount of information available on YouTube. Your topic is not clear, go and clear the topic and be on the same page with the rest of the people. That was not there earlier. They can give 10 different tests and assignments to ensure where they stand. So just revisiting, and one of my previous assignments, I worked for Akash Education. And one of the things that I realized, that kids were really curious about, that they're learning in class, different coaching centers, different class, but there's a group of 50-60 students, right? But what online enabled them to do, if there is a test launched, they are able to immediately, because they're going to give and prepare for a national level exam, NEET or JE, they are able to immediately evaluate where they stand. So while they are learning in, let's say, Bundelkhand as a chota sa city, in a tier 3 city or tier 2 city, they are able to immediately evaluate where are they standing and what is their standing. So I think this has been a phenomenal possibility that people have started leveraging. And yeah, so that's my point to this. Thank you, Gaurav.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's
Shivani.
great. I think we are a little short on time, so I'll just ask only two really important questions. One would be the role of data and technology that the digital world and universities are trying to harness so that they can get the information to improve student engagement, as well as Gaurav mentioned that he's currently in works of partnering with physical universities. So if somebody who's going to start their digital university on their own, what are like the correct forms of partnerships or tool stacks that they need to look at so that they can start from maybe day zero?
All right, which one you want us to start with first?
I think Rajiv, you can talk about the data and the technology aspect, because I remember in our conversation you've sort of nailed your way of transferring qualitative information to enhance experience, and maybe Gaurav can discuss how partnerships are benefiting both online and physical universities.
So, all right, thanks, Jagrati. I'll start first on the first question, and I'll take a minute to just visit the one of the event that happened in my time. So since my childhood, I've been very very close to education and learning, and thanks to the I mean, the upbringing that I had in the family. So I really wanted to start a school because I literally grown up in a tier three city. So I've really experienced that side of education where it was not. I mean, good quality education was not really accessible to me. Sometimes I had a lot of questions, and I was so full of questions that sometimes my teachers were like either saying that sorry, this is not the right time, or come back later, and all those statements I've gone through. So I had this, and I wanted to create something where students can just walk up to me and ask any question, and I would have answer of all the questions. I know and it's bound to be a failed dream, but then I really wanted to do something. So in 2014, I started in school in my hometown, and I started with this vision, and and when I started this, I wanted to make this happen, and this started happening, and now my mom is literally taking care of it. But then this one line that anyone can walk up to me and I'll have all the answers has really been practically possible through the help of Google, because then okay, you come to me, I'll if I'm able to answer, I'll answer. If not, then I'll come back to you tomorrow. But I made sure that if my nights are up, I'm able to answer those questions. So where I'm really coming to is that I've really seen the power of and just one more point. So after some 30-35 students, I was able to, in 6 months, I was able to fairly see what kind of mindset one of the guy is having and what kind of person he might become in his future. I knew the kind of questions that they were having, and I knew that if I'll raise one particular topic, this particular guy is going to ask 10 questions and rest of the guys are going to be silent. So since I had this level of learning, it was just mental model, right? I did that. But with data and with the right leverage of data, we can really do that to this, at scale. If even 1,000 students are learning in a particular batch and they are learning for a few months, based on the very behavior on which they are learning, we can literally predict and tell this kind of questions might come. And a lot of startups have started solving this problem for people when they're able to predict the kind of question that might come, the kind of learning path that needs to be designed for this student, the kind of assessment that can be given. One of the example that I was taking of, the previous assignment, that we were able to conduct the national level, data of students, and we were able to know which city is going to get us more toppers, for example, right? And the people who are to an extent, when we are able to predict to students, and this was an opener for me also, when we're able to predict JEE preparation student, that if he's preparing for JEE exams, and we're able to tell that if you are able to solve optics and we're able to score this much in optics and then learn force or energy, then and 90% of the people who have been toppers have had scored more than 99% in these two subjects, something like this. And this has been phenomenal and enriching information for students when they're able to know that most of the toppers who topped national level exam or top 10, what are the strong subjects, strong topics of physics they were at, right? And how much they scored, and what was their weekly score or monthly score or quarterly score, right? And having this much of information literally helped us shape a series of 30,000-40,000 question bank, when we were able to prioritize that this kind of question you should answer, this kind of question you should answer, to ensure you are able to prepare well. So I think with the help of data, we can literally personalize learning, and learning has to be personalized because we have to ensure that people are able to understand and inculcate a topic and not really taught by a teacher. And that has been by the effort of all traditional education. When we decided there'll be certain cohort of only 20-30 students in a batch, the premise and the foundation was that we are able to focus on each and every student and not really play the scalable game, and that worked. And I think with the help of data and technology, we are able to solve it at scale. So and we are able to do that across the globe, across the topics. What kind of master class is needed for people to learn in a certain way, and then a lot of course marketing can emerge out of it. We know what to sell, what not to sell, when to sell. A lot of things started coming. The leverage of data and technology over a period of time, when it comes to marketing and product design in education, for me has been really, really enriching. And it literally helped me transform businesses that I've worked with in the past in many, many ways. When I was able to predict the overall ROI of what is going to come. I'm purely thinking, wearing a marketeer hat, and I'm telling that I was able to predict that if you launch this, this is the kind of ROI that you can expect from this. Because it was evident for me. I just had to do an A/B and validate that hypothesis. That's it, and it worked. Yeah. Just one more point I want to add is that sometimes it become we became a victim of using too much technology or using too less technology, using too much data or using too less of data. So uh, weeding out the cognitive biases of the people who are decision makers and thinking purely, being empathetic to the person and thinking from their point of view, what is their need. And the moment we own their need, we are able to come up with creative solutions. And like I said, creative solutions can come from anywhere. So I have seen sometimes, and again, reaching out to students himself and asking that, what do you think would be the solution of this problem? And then solution emerged. So yeah. So some of the things we tried, I had a super experimental mindset in the past and worked for me. So yeah. So that's what I wanted to contribute. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thank you.
Sure. So I think I'll explain the student journey, right? For if an institution wants to go digital and things are going, building a digital university, it's very important to their thinking through the entire life cycle of the student. Very often, people believe that they can have different tools, and they can have, admissions managed separately, and then they can have their marketing managed separately, and then they can start thinking about, uh, you know, from a teaching standpoint, I'll just bring in some content, I'll get some recorded lectures, or I'll use YouTube, for example, or I'll tie up with a certain company to give me that content. But the critical point out here is, how does that entire journey flow from a student standpoint, from your standpoint, from the time the student has got into your program or is identifying your program amongst many others, to the time the student has come in? What is his learning been? Is that being captured? How much is the student learning? Is that being captured? How much is the student scoring? Is that being captured? If a student is going to look for jobs and employability in the future, then what kind of support will that student require? Right? All of that needs to be thought through when you're building a digital university. You can't think of this as many different pieces. You got to think of it as a collective. Where a lot of people get it right or wrong is, you get it wrong or you end up spending a lot more time and money is when you're not thinking about the big picture, but thinking of these as separate independent pieces where one piece is not talking to the other, right? And then because you have too many different technological layers, they're not talking to each other, and essentially there's a breakdown. It happens at universities, even happens surprisingly in the tech space, right? More often. So that's one piece that I'll tell most universities be careful about. Just think about things holistically. I'll talk about Lead Square here also. It's important I bring it out. But when we were talking to you, we were very clear that if we are working with Lead Square right in the beginning, right, even when we were very young, we were very clear we need a CRM. We need a CRM to manage our information. We need our CRM to ensure that we know where our students are coming from, what kind of students are coming in. Specifically, we're going thinking of, let's say, postgraduate degrees. How do I know whether the person who is applying onto campus actually has a valid degree? Where am I keeping that information? How am I ensuring what kind of background is this person coming in from? Right? If I have access to information right in the beginning, I can look at it across the journey. When I don't have access to information, I'm blind. Then I'm going to go back and say, all right, I haven't done this. Now I've got to go back and correct. And by that time, I'm just running in circles. So when people look at the overall picture, that's the first thing. The kind of partnerships they've got to look at is, okay, what problem am I trying to solve? Right? Am I trying to use it from a complementary standpoint? I just want to take care of examination. That's a very simple thing. But if I'm looking at it collectively from a standpoint of managing and mapping admissions, right, or from a marketing standpoint, to essentially teaching in the classroom, and what kind of LMS do I want? Like, there are multiple LMSs out there, right? You could use free, so you have platforms like Moodle on which you can build. All right. Then there are paid platforms like Canvas. There are a lot of LMSs out there. Your question out here is, how much am I willing to spend? How much am I willing to customize? Do I have internal people that can help me customize my learning management system? Is it just going to be like a YouTube video followed by comments, or am I going to have some remedial measures embedded into it? Then now, to your question on data, if my students are learning and I'm having access to such data, how am I using it? Right? I just yesterday, surprisingly, you brought this question up, but just yesterday I was talking and we were working on building a program for a university. And one of the questions that came up is even, and this came up from a professor, by the way. He said, Gaurav, we have three kinds of students. When you put in three buckets, so we're talking about communication skills for final year students. And he said, Gaurav, and I was telling him that one of the members did mention just create one program and we wanted for so many hours, but I wasn't of the same opinion. So I was having his view. And he said, Gaurav, the challenge over here is in India, a lot of students don't necessarily come in from a background in high school where they've studied the English medium syllabus, right? Maybe till 10th, they haven't, 11th, 12th, they have to, or they go into a larger city where they have more access, but then they still have a little bit of a challenge. Now, that doesn't mean they're not smart students. They may be really technically competent. They may be very, very good, right? And we can't judge people on their proficiency in English, which is not even the national language of sorts, right? I mean, it is one of the languages, but people, for example, could be very proficient in Tamil, for example. They could be very proficient in Telugu, or they could have had their childhood education maybe in Marathi or in Hindi, for example, right? It could come in any language. That could be their base language. They think in that language. They may be very technically competent, but they are not able to bring that understanding of that subject matter knowledge while then their comprehension in English. So one of the things that we've got to do, or that came in from the faculty, is like, Gaurav, when you're thinking of building this program, think of putting people in different buckets. Take a pre-test. See if you're creating content and that content doesn't engage somebody who's already very good, he's going to drop out. So I'm creating content, and let's assume you speak English beautifully, Jagrati. That content may not be appealing to you because it's very basic. I'm not really learning anything out of it. You'll hop out. For example, and it could be me here. I haven't, I don't come in. Let's assume I've come in from a background where my English isn't the best. I might find that content very difficult because I probably need something simpler, and maybe I need more time to kind of come to that level. So if I have a pre-test that helps me break students down into different buckets, identify how am I going to manage each bucket. Somebody requires more remedial content, somebody requires less remedial content, then I can decide and devise how I'm going to address each group. Now, that is what technology can do for you, right? That can't happen in the physical classroom because of paucity of time. But I can create different programs and use technology to decide how am I going to test a certain group versus how am I going to test a certain group. Where do I need to give more time and spend more time on the basics versus where am I going to spend more time on the more high level questions if somebody is already at a certain level, just to keep them engaged, right? And I think when you're thinking about building a digital university, you've got to not just think about having a platform where you can just put some videos and some questions. That time has gone 10 years back. If you're still adopting to those means, you'll probably not engage your students. But if you can start thinking of this holistically, start using data to identify your students' strengths, if you can start using data to identify what learning needs are going to be met for each student, if I can start using data to help companies tell companies, for example, when they're coming to my campus, what, I've got these 200 students in my engineering batch, but out of these 200, these 20 are really, really good at cybersecurity. Or these 200 students are really, really good, let's say in on the database side, right? Then I am helping them pick out the best students. I'm giving them access to the right talent. Also, I'm also serving my students well because I'm helping to play them on their strengths, right? So I think those aspects need to be thought through because you can't keep constantly building and rebuilding technology. And if you don't have in-house competence, my suggestion is to work with experts because you will spend a lot of time and keep redoing it again and again. So that's out of experience that I can tell you. uh, some piece of advice.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rajiv and Gaurav, for sharing your thoughts. I think now we can open the floor to the audience. I see quite a few questions have come up. All right. So I think Pravesh Bishnoi, he asked, may I know the necessary technological need to start a digital university or an education?
Okay, Gaurav, you want to start?
Sure. So, as I told you, you need to start with the CRM. Firstly, to get access to who your students are, where are they coming from, get access to information. That's the first part. The second part, of course, is having a learning management system so that you know and identifying what kind of LMS you require. That's the second piece. Then, if you're going to conduct examinations, then see if your LMS has features to conduct examinations or do you need a different tool. So then that's a third thing. You can have a community in the classroom. Do you want to engage your, do you have those features built in your LMS, or you want to have a separate tool for community management? That's the third part. That's another part. Then student support, right? If I have students and they'll go learning online, then they also have questions. How are they being addressed? Are they being addressed through the LMS? How am I, how, what's my response time? How am I going to think through all of that? Again, becomes another channel, right? And then obviously certification, right? How am I ensuring that once the student graduates, how is the certification going to be managed? How is that data going to be in my system? I think that entire journey, as I told you, has to be looked into when you're looking at tools. And there are different tools, or you might be able to find integrated tools also, depending on what you're looking at. But being able to think through this entire journey becomes important, and being able to see how, if I'm using an LMS, does it allow me to build on it, right? Sometimes I may have some baseline information, but if I want to do something more on it, I want to start uh, you know building on it, it doesn't give me that functionality, or I feel I'm stuck. So trying to think through some of these pieces, having consultant early on will help you kind of make the right choices. Rajiv, anything you'd like to add?
So yeah, so there are two things I wanted to mention. I'm just speaking to nuggets that you mentioned, Gaurav. One is looking at the entire student journey and finding what are the areas where technology can really enable the growth and scale, um, uh, with higher efficiency towards the experience, building the right experience. Second thing that I mentioned about building technology over one technology. So this is something that has been my learning, and I'll advise everyone to ensure whatever technology that are implementing should be open enough to accept and bridge the gap with other technology. Otherwise, it can become a sunk cost over a period of time. Uh, so this thing needs to be very careful because it's one of the capex that people do. And third thing, I believe one of the core element of any digital university is the product, and that is the content itself. Uh, since we have been talking about this, so much of content has already been democratized. It's already available. I think there's certain quality and standard of content that needs to be maintained to ensure what we are offering should be somewhere above the notch of what is available out there in any shape and form. But it can never be substandard, because if the product is not up to the mark in terms of the very behavior and the way the quality and the content is being designed, uh, somewhere the technology will not be able to support and strengthen. So build a strong product and ensure technology can help scale,
I agree.
and then choosing the right technology which can connect to each other and help you build a bigger infrastructure of your CRM, LMS, entire marketing automation engine, uh, which covers the learning, the communication, and entire database management at one place, for you to just see the data, traverse across, find out, and build a lot of insights around it. If these three systems are functioning in silos, probably merging the data and building insights out of it will really not work. I would like to mention, thankfully, over a period of time and having my hands-on experience across a large and low-scale CRMs, I found a lead squad to be pretty flexible in terms of
I
the connectivity, and the blend that they've been able to create between the tools out there and the product they have. It's fairly open and simple to connect and build upon this. Yeah. So thanks, Gaurav.
Great. I think we can still take about two more questions if that's okay.
That's fine.
I'm good.
Sure. Neeraj's question: what is a good blend of live classes and recorded classes on digital universities?
I'll take this one. I think the right blend is to first identify what kind of learner are you talking about. Is your learner in the university, or is your learner a working professional? Right? What we have seen works for our students and the program. I'm talking about my experience here. It could be different for different people. Is to essentially maximize the live learning and let that be at least a 60-40 ratio, if not, and go down to 50-50 at most. If you try to minimize the live learning and use more recorded lectures, see, the challenge with recorded content, or what we call as asynchronous content, which is recorded earlier, has been that if I look at MOOCs, the average completion rate has been about 8%, 8 to 9, 10%. And the minute you add a live trainer component onto it, that same success moves up to 70%. right? And if you're looking at purely live classes, you barely have any dropouts, right? Your success rate is between 85-90% and above, right? So now the question is, how do I maximize my student outcomes, and how do I ensure that what point is the price and my time also make, there's a cost benefit analysis that has to be done. Because often when you're giving only recorded lectures out, right, the student does not have an engagement, and there's no engagement, that student drops off. But if I can create a situation where a student can have his doubts answered, if I have access, for example, to live classes to ensure case studies are being discussed, that students engage, right? Students can engage in an offline classroom, and students also want to engage in an online classroom, right? And if I have a good class size, let's say 30, 40, 50 students, then I'm also learning from my classmates. So that also becomes extremely important, not too big, not too small, right? So your live versus a good number, I tell you, is about a 60-40 or a 50-50 ratio is a good ratio to look at. If you're looking at a higher amount of recorded delivery versus live delivery, the risk you run is your students may either drop out of the classroom or will probably move on with limited learning outcomes. So that, I think, that has to be looked into.
Okay. We have one
Raj,
more question. Yeah, but I think you may have answered it during your conversation. So feel free to, if you want to add anything to it, you might want to do that now. Ashwarya's question is: do you feel the usage of tech in regular universities and digital university for getting insights for their student profiles is the major difference to understand and provide them what they want?
So I'll take this one, and I believe yes. Answer yes, because this has been really really enriching and insightful for a lot of educational institutions, and including few universities also. Uh, they the moment they've started learning about how people are really behaving, and how what kind of queries that they have, what kind of questions that they have, what kind of content they need, suddenly the entire content delivery and structure has changed. They knew the kind of faculty is going to teach the kind of product or topic. They knew the kind of cohort they need to create to ensure that the engagement ratio is maintained, as Gaurav was mentioning earlier. That I think the primary role is to understand what is the optimal engagement that I want to maintain in the class, and in order to do that, what kind of insights are needed for us to take those decisions to build the entire delivery engine around it. Uh, yeah, so I want to go back to the previous question where Gaurav was mentioning about the blend of digital and recorded. I think uh, one is the right blend of the quality of content, and also it is about the right blend of the sequencing of the content. So
correct.
starting with recorded may not always work. You start with live, you build that enthusiasm and you build that engagement, and if people have had the first hand experience of the quality of content that we are able to give, then probably answering few questions and few doubts in some percentage over a period of time can be done through recorded or asynchronous learning. uh, but as you rightly mentioned, Gaurav, there is a cost benefit analysis, and there is this becomes a clear factor over a period of time. So even if someone is able to maintain at 50%, it's a fair deal, and it's a win-win for both, in terms of the quality of content, the engagement of the content, and of course the commercial implications of the same.
Okay. I'll let our moderator share the last closing lines, I think, before we conclude.
I'm so sorry. I think it's the Murphy's law or something, that today was the day when my internet decided to be so sketchy. But nevertheless, thank you so much, Gaurav and Rajiv, for taking your time on a Friday evening and sharing such insightful things when it comes to technology, data, the kind of education we as educators can provide to our students, and the opportunities we can create. And I'm sure our audience also had a lot of fun listening to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you
Thank
so
for
you.
much,
inviting us.
Jagriti,
Thank you.
Gaurav,
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for the
Shivani.
time. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.